Greetings and welcome to Epic Battlecry! This is the place where we cut through the crap to bring you the real deal on the gaming industry today. I am Brent Adams, joined by my pragmatist of pummeling, my realist of revengeance, Daniel Kaiser, and Tony Grice. What's going on, fellas?
Oh, it's Tuesday. September 2nd.
It's Tuesday, and as you know, we always celebrate Tuesday with the waking up on a Tuesday.
Yes.
Because...
And it's about all you can ask for. I mean, it's too much to ask for on Monday, but on Tuesday it's like, look, take what you can get. And just,
Tuesday is they do 2 for Tuesday,
kind of like McDonald's
on the classic rock station. So you might hear a double dose of Aerosmith or Led Zeppelin.
That is true.
If you're lucky, Rush.
And if anyone actually listened to a radio anymore, that might matter.
It's always like a double dose of like Journey or Foghat or some useless band.
No, if you're lucky, it's Rush. You get the Tom Sawyer.
That's true. That they do that because then they can take like an hour break and nobody will notice.
Let me look up the meaning of the word lucky, because I'm not sure if you and I are exactly on the same page.
He didn't specify who was lucky. Anyway,
it is Tuesday, September 2nd. Welcome back, everybody. We have got a question today from Sundown, and this is Sundown or Sundown at Sundown. 1979. He capitalizes the O.
Assuming
I don't know why,
he's a he.
but anyway, it's right. Could be a she. But anyway, at Sundown 1979 says at EpicBattleCry.
Yes, let's hear it.
Will graphics reach a plateau of realism this generation in which violence in games will be too much for most to stomach? Now, Daniel, I know you're dying to talk about this, so Tony, let's go to you first. No, I'm just kidding. Daniel, what do you think? I'm sure you've got an opinion on this.
I do. I have an opinion on it. I think that was this generation. I think not.
You mean like PS3, PS3,
Xbox 360? Yes. In terms of where it reached a point where it's like. It should be moderated in a slightly different way. I think the realism level of graphics and everything that's being able to be achieved with physics engines and what happens in terms of the portrayal of whatever's happening on screen. This past generation reached a point of realism where I think you have to be really aware of what you're putting there. I'm not saying people should not do it or that it should stop, but I'm just saying that it takes into consideration the fact that there's less left to the imagination than ever before. Whereas, when you're playing old school games on the 32-bit era consoles or 16-bit or whatever, there's those.
You're kind of physically incapable of having like really realistic violence.
But now, and I remember, talking to developers or interviewing some developers, and they're talking about, how the trajectory of a particular bullet might influence the way the impact happens with the, you look at a game like Sniper Elite and things like that, where like they have the, I don't know, they call it a something cam, like a kill cam or something. But I mean, there's literally, if you get a headshot, it shows in slow motion, it actually penetrating the armor, penetrating the skull, doing all this stuff. So, I mean, it's very graphic, but whatever, more power to them and whoever wants to play it. But I don't think... I think we've already reached that point, to be honest with you, where they need to be aware of things. As far as it being too much for most to stomach, that depends on the creative choices of the developer. I think, there's a place for particularly gory games, and people who want that type of content. That's great, just as long as you're, kind of aware of what you're getting yourself into. You look at games like Evil Within and things like that. I mean, it's going to be pretty damn gory, so buckle up and know what you're getting yourself into. So I think we're already there is kind of my answer to that question.
Okay, Tony.
I'm kind of with you on that a little bit, although I do think that this is going to be I think this is going to be the generation, the one that we're starting right now, that things become kind of realistic to the point where it sort of becomes, in my opinion, more like what we see in movies. And the fact is, I think that gaming in general is going to get to the point where people look at them a little bit more like they look at movies. There's not a lot made of, a violent, horror film coming out in theaters these days. Yet there is still a decent amount made about like a violent video game.
Right.
Granted, there is, the interactivity of it, you can argue might have it has a different effect versus just watching something.
Isn't that also sort of the traditional view that video games are for kids? Therefore,
exactly.
Ultra-violent video games are being exposed to kids, and people kind of forget that adults play video games now.
I think a lot of that is because the fact that I think that there has been this realism level that we hadn't quite reached yet that made it made games more palatable to people that aren't already excited about them, I guess is the way to put it. So like if you're already into video games and you see like something like the Resident Evil or Silent Hill or something from the last generation of consoles, I don't think that it would have turned you around. Whereas now I think we're going to start getting graphics that make it almost, I mean not quite, but more on par with a film, which I think will in turn make it a little more mainstream. And I think because of that, you will have to be more, people are going to have to be. But I mean, frankly, they always should have been. I don't think that they need to be any more than they should have been, but I think they need to be more than they have been.
Right.
Careful of letting their kids play violent video games because it's the same way that the same people that'll go out and buy their 10-year-old a violent video game will a lot of times not let them go see that violent movie in a theater, which I think you could argue is just as much or is not even as violent. So I think you're going to get to that point where it is going to be more realistic, but I think that will prompt people to look at it differently. And therefore, I don't know that it'll actually. I don't know. I don't think that it will be. The kind of hold too much to stomach for some people.
Yeah.
I actually think that it'll now just maybe be a little more clear where it sits. And so, if it is violent, I think people will become more aware of it, and so they'll steer away from it if they don't want to see it, or if they don't want their kids to see it, or whatever.
Right.
And if they are looking for that, I don't think it'll change anything. I think it'll just be a better experience for them. Whatever they were hoping to see.
Right. I think you were kind of making a similar point that I was going to make, Tony, which is I think that to kind of separate the question into two parts. A, will graphics reach a plateau of realism in this generation? Yeah, I think that they will. I think that if you look at where things started in the 360 PS3 era and where they ended up, and if you look at where things are right now in the PS4 Xbox One era, I do think that in maybe 3-4 years, I think that the level of graphic realism is going to be pretty astonishing.
Yeah.
Really, like when taken in context of, I mean, it will be a natural progression, but I think that it will still be pretty amazing actually. Where we will likely get to. So that part of the question, yes. But as far as like reaching that plateau, as far as like reaching that level where video games are just a hair away from being photorealistic as say movies or whatever, I don't think that will be a deterrent in terms of violence, just because there is so much violent content on television and film and so forth that people consume all the time. And so, if video games make it to that same level, I don't think that it will necessarily be all that different. Now, I do think that people's perception of video gaming as a medium, and maybe what they think about people who tend to play games, whether or not they have realistic kind of expectations in terms of like the age group that gravitates to that and those kinds of things. I think that those are all kind of valid concerns, but
sure.
Ultimately, it seems pretty clear, at least in the United States. I can't really speak knowledgeably about any other countries, but it seems at least in the U.S., people are pretty comfortable having violent content in film and television, and so I don't think that it will really be all that much of a deterrent as far as video games go.
Yeah.
Which is fine with me. I always say, like, I like to keep my violence imaginary. I'd much rather have pretend violence than actual violence.
Right.
So that's totally cool with me.
You'd much rather? I mean, it still sounds like you're kind of hedging that you'll still have your violence if you want it.
Oh, he will.
Well, I accept the fact that I have to tolerate real world violence, but I would rather not. I would rather it be purely a product of artistic expression. But
spectators.
I'm not likely to get that wish anytime soon.
Yes, I agree. Maybe next generation of consoles.
That's the real question. It's like, will gaming get so good in the next generation of consoles that humanity will just abandon war? They're like, you know what? Like, we could engage in war, but fuck it, man. PlayStation 5.
Yes.
You kidding me?
Kicks butt.
Well, let's, if PlayStation servers are still up in a few years, we'll...
Assuming they haven't been hacked at that point. Yeah. But anyway, thank you so much for the question, Sundown. Hope you enjoyed the discussion, and we'd love to hear your suggestions for future topics on Epic Battlecry. If you got a question you want us to answer, a news story that you want us to sound off on, you know where to find us, at Epic Battleaxe on Twitter. Please support the show. We're at youtube.com/EpicBattleAxe. Throw us a like, subscribe to the show, all that stuff really helps us out. And of course, we would love to hear your comments and thoughts on this topic. If you're a member of the Axehead Army, EpicBattleAxe.com is the place to go and let your voice be heard. We're going to be back tomorrow with an all-new edition of Epic Battlecry, fueled by your questions and comments. See you next time. Until then, cry havoc and let your voice be heard.
Peace.
It's the only thing worth fighting for.
Unless the graphics are better.
Yeah, I mean, I'll fight for fucking better graphics, believe you me.
That's right.